Welcome to the Foul Play Book Club, Brendan's Brigade, where we're reading The Anatomy of a False Confession, The Interrogation and Conviction of Brendan Dassey by Michael D. Cicchini.
Michael D. Cicchini is a criminal defense lawyer in Kenosha, Wisconsin, about 2 hours south of Manitowoc, where Making a Murderer was filmed. In addition to practicing criminal defense, Cicchini has written 4 books, 20 law review articles, and a monthly column on criminal and constitutional law.
Welcome to our discussions. Who wants to start?
I got something we could start off with. In the beginning, he starts out telling Brendan's account, but actually, we know because of Dr. Silkman's project, where he wrote where Brendan's story changed, that it's actually somewhere between Brendan's third and sixth account of what happened that day.
The first time Brendan was approached was by Detective O'Neill and I forgot her name. Baldwin, and that was on the way to Crivets. They took him out of the car and put him in the police car, as far as I remember, and they started asking him casually, what does he know about Teresa and what happened that day? And after saying several times that he doesn't know nothing, I don't know nothing,
And never seen her, right?
and never seen her, they started probing and pushing and doubting him to the point that he became very wobbly.
Well, I
And
don't think, sorry, Neville, to interrupt you
uh-huh,
there, I don't think I would say that there was anything casual about the interaction between O'Neill, Baldwin, and Brendan in the back of that police car. They weren't asking him for information, they were demanding that he tell them what he knew. They were assuming they were assuming that they had information that he knew what had been going on with Teresa Holbeck, and they demanded that he tell them. They weren't asking him to tell them what had happened from his point of view. They were demanding that he tell them what he knew about Teresa. They were insisting to him that they knew that he was aware of something. There's quite a difference there.
I see that now.
Well, I have a question about that. Is that not supposed to be, first of all, recorded? Was it not supposed to be considered his statement when he said, I don't know? I don't know nothing.
I was given to believe that I thought some of that was recorded um,
It is
by a
audio,
recorder within the car, isn't it?
right?
Yes.
Because
Okay.
you hear the hazard lights the whole time
Oh,
going
The
because they're
hazard
off to the
lights.
that's
side of
the
the road,
one.
You
and
you
you
can
Okay.
hear the
hear
hazard lights click, 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 click.
All
Click,
right
and you
click.
then.
and the wind buffering up against the windows and stuff like that. It is recorded within the car,
Okay.
and
Yes,
it's like it's what where O'Neill turns around and says, "Oh well, I ain't trying to put words in your mouth or nothing,"
Yep.
but that is exactly what he was doing.
I recall that one now. Okay.
Tell us what you know, Brendan. No, no, you know something. Why don't you know? But I'm not. You know something, but I'm not trying to put words in your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, poor
Just
Brendan, he told them, I don't know anything about it. I saw her leave because we had to step away so she could drive past by us. So
yes, but that's
that's
after it's already changed, and that's the story he said in the book.
Mm.
See,
interesting.
that's another
It's
thing that was held up as legal, and they said he wasn't in custody. He was in custody. They pulled him over, put him in the back of a cop car, where he's not free to leave because he's a minor in an adult person's car, and they started asking him questions without Mirandizing him, without even telling him he could get an attorney or that he's free to leave, and he sat there, stuck at their whim, and pressured by them to start saying things, and they started saying, we know this and that about Teresa. We know, they're the ones projecting what they
Well,
want to hear.
and when you're
Right
in the
from the
back of a
beginning.
cop car, you can't
Yeah, but
open
the
the
court
door
said that
to
wasn't, that
leave.
he
You
wasn't in
can't
custody.
from inside it. You can't open the car door to leave.
He was in
Oh,
custody.
Even if
that
he
is key.
even if he
Yes.
could, I promise you, that kid didn't think he could. To him, they had him, and it was not an option for him to just
Well,
get out and walk
technically,
away.
if they put him in the back of that car and he could not have physically opened those doors, technically
No.
he was being detained. Period.
Those
Yes.
doors
It
are
doesn't matter
fitted.
anyway. There's a difference between being detained and being in custody. And it
Yeah.
comes down to what the person would believe if they believed that they could not be free to
That's
leave, not
right.
whether or not the cops would have let him leave. So
Those
there's no
doors.
way he would
Sorry.
have believed he could just leave. So that means he is in custody, even without handcuffs, even without being in a police in an interrogation room or something. He doesn't have to be. All he has to be is perceive that he is not free to leave. And when you're pulled over and hauled out of the vehicle you're in and put into another vehicle, then you're obviously not free to leave.
That's custodial.
That's because he was in custody and should have been Mirandized.
Well,
Well,
and who
my
knows? They might have even
understanding,
patted him down. They might have even patted him down before they put him in the back of a cop car, because they quite frequently do, because they
That
don't
would be
want you with a
standard
weapon in the
procedure.
back of a cop car.
That
You
would be
know,
absolute standard procedure before they allow anybody into the back of a police car. They check
exactly.
everybody for a weapon.
understanding of the Miranda is that the Miranda warnings or rights need to be read to you if the suspect is already in the police station or in custody. So I guess there's a gray area there. What's in
No, it's
custody
not
versus
gray.
station?
I
The
understand
Supreme
it
Court
that
already
I
decided that. They
I
already
understand.
decided on that case exactly. And if a person perceives that they are not free to leave, then they are in custody. They do not have to be in a police station or have handcuffs on.
And
I am led to believe that there has been a court ruling in America. If a policeman on the street was to stop a pedestrian and says that they are being not held in custody, but that they are being detained, then they are in fact in custody because they are not free to leave. There cannot be a grey area between being in custody and being free to leave. Being detained for the purposes of is not an umbrella that you can use that will skirt between the two positions. You are either in custody or you are not. It's a very
agree.
simple matter of law. If you are being detained, then technically you are in police custody. It's whether you've been arrested or not. If you are being detained and told that you cannot leave for the purposes of inquiries or any other purpose, you are in custody.
For all
And
practical
that is a
purposes.
ruling by
And if
I'm not sure what court it is in America. It's only come out within the last couple of years. It is not being adopted across America, but it
Well,
is a recent ruling.
they're allowed to detain you for like 72 hours without ever charging you. They
Right,
can
but then they've got
Well,
to
still,
let them know. Right.
my understanding of being detained is that you're not formally accused of committing a crime, but simply restricted and kept in police custody on a reasonable suspicion. But then, if you're
But not
in
necessarily being
custody,
placed under arrest.
it's in question or investigated by police authorities. So I'm still get confused about the real implications here of,
There is too much
Well,
variation
that's
yeah.
across the
why the
50
Supreme
states
Court
of
already
America.
decided if you feel that you're not free to leave, period, then you're in
You're
custody.
in custody,
That's
that's
it.
correct. Yeah.
So you can be detained, you're right. And that's totally different. They can't start questioning you without reading your Miranda rights because you're already in custody, you're not free to leave.
Okay.
So there's lots of states aren't implementing that. but the Supreme Court already decided. That's why I don't understand. The appellate courts are crooked too, because there's so many issues that they should have just reopened on. It would have been tossed here in California. Lots of the stuff they did would have been tossed here in California, even if there was a murderer who confessed. They would have been like, you can't do this, this, and this. And so none of this is admissible, and they would have tossed him. So Wisconsin,
in my view, as far as any of the Mirandizing of Brendan goes, none of it is worth a rub.
Right.
All they do with that boy is confuse him again and again and again.
Intimidate.
One person after another, after another, after another. They are bombarding him with so many different types of language, nuances, meanings.
yeah, his
It's
test
the
scores for
methods
his
of
reading
delivery.
comprehension are really low, like first grader.
That boy is being shoved from pillar to post, and he really does not have a clue where he is. However,
No, he had no
he is
comprehension.
being held by people in authority. So he is fearful and he is compliant. The last thing that boy wants to do is be a problem, get into trouble, or cause his mum any cause to scream at him. So he's trying to do his best. They knew it. It was all about manipulation and intimidation. They screwed with that boy before they even got anywhere near anything that needed to be made a record of.
And generally speaking, Miranda rights actually do not work out for the police. They are to protect the suspects or detainees' rights. So that's a conflict of interest right there. So in order to... Go ahead, Jack.
I was just going to say this, we're at a discussion, and it's a very legal one in the sense of custodial. What is custodial and what's non-custodial? So when he was at the police station on March 1st, they're telling him he's free to leave. That is a non-custodial. And even though he was given his Miranda rights, they were telling him he was free to leave. They tried to make that clear. That's a non-custodial interview. So he could just get up and walk out. Certainly, though, when they put him in the room behind the table, whatever, and close the door, do you think he really felt like
no charge? No charge.
This is another one. And yep. I'm going to say one more thing, and I'll shut up. Think about Fox Hills. Now, I don't care what anybody says. In my mind, that was just shy of a kidnapping. It was custodial. Now, if we believe what Barb says, she said they told her if she left, she'd be arrested. So why didn't they take them to the police station if they wanted to interview them, if they felt this safety was a big issue? I don't believe it.
Barb also says that nobody was interviewed, though.
Well, you see, this is a grey area. Because there are no video cameras, there are no recording machines. They will turn any sort of innocuous, mundane conversation, just chit chat between have you seen this film, Brendan? Have you seen that film, Brendan? It's all part of the process of breaking Brendan down. And the time that they spend at Fox Hills, I believe, is entirely to ruin Brendan to a point where they can take him before a camera and he will do their bidding. That's my guess. That's why they held him at Fox Hills.
I'm not going to go off too far into these calls that we've got from Brendan, but there is one call that he apparently had told Barb that they talked to him and told him stuff before that March 1st interview that was recorded. That's all I got to say about that.
Wow.
Yes, but when they came to the court, they said due to the technical difficulties that they didn't have the battery charger.
Wasn't working.
Right, correct. And the judge still admitted that. Yeah, very conveniently.
Yeah, but
I would like just to...
Yeah, but what point do they get? I mean, because if it is the law that it is supposed to be recorded, they should not have proceeded until
That's
there
right.
was a way to record this, because that
That's
would have been
absolutely right.
illegal.
Yeah. But Mr. Cicchini actually went and explained how the tactics that police use, how they use them, and what tactics they use actually for bypassing the Miranda rights, and how do they get suspects to waive the Miranda rights because that's in the police interest, right?
Just
So
as quickly as the law are finding ways to protect an individual from the police, so the police are looking to develop ways around that law. As soon as that law is implemented, they are looking for ways to skirt that law without breaking it, but at the same time getting what it is that they're looking for. You know, it's a game of cat and dog with the law and the police. So, you know, it's
yes,
They flat out break the law and they don't care because the courts uphold it. Just like Kratz withholding evidence.
yeah, of
That was
course.
upheld. Just
Of
like them not
doing the
taking
press
they couldn't take
conference.
Brendan to MTSO or CASO to interrogate him and had everything recorded, and they intentionally didn't. They took him to a hotel room. Are you kidding me? Adult men taking a teenager to a hotel room.
I know, right?
You know,
Yeah.
and they get away with this. You know, what's the excuse for that? Why would they were already working in conjunction with these other law enforcement. So why wouldn't they use one of their interrogation rooms? It makes no sense at all.
Nope. You're right.
Yeah.
So
Because
they don't
they
care about the
wanna,
law.
yeah, and by bypassing all of this, what they want to do is, after establishing some kind of a rapport with the suspect, they want to get into this what called shop talk, which they talk kind of again casually, mundane questions and mundane topics. So the suspect starts talking about the case eventually without being Mirandized.
Well,
So
and they make it personal because there's also references in these calls where Brendan's referring to Weger and Fassbender as Mark and Tom. So now we're more personal. We're on a first name basis with these cops that have absolutely, they're not there for him. They're there for their job.
but they told him explicitly that they're their friends. They're not there
Yeah.
as cops.
It's a lie.
And father
It's
figures.
a lie.
And father figures.
Yes, father figures.
And Brendan did not have the comprehension to understand
Yeah.
what they were doing. He just didn't. There's no way. But leading,
Yeah.
you know, from Fox Hills, you know, we're on the 27th of, or 28th, whatever it was, 27th of February, and 3 days later, he's arrested. Now, come on, guys.
I mean, and in my opinion, and I mean this is just my opinion, the Wayne didn't even know what consistency meant when he asked his mum in one of the calls, what does consistency mean? But how do they expect him? I don't even think he knew what a lawyer actually was, apart from what he's seen on TV. So 1 minute they're telling him that he can talk to them without a lawyer, and then they're saying that, oh well, we can't get you a lawyer. So that's confusing the Wayne even more. And I don't think he would have had the guts, even if he understood what was happening with his Miranda rights. I don't think that Wayne would have had the guts to turn around and say, stop, wait a minute, I'm not talking anymore, because of how they were being with him.
Yeah. Yeah. But they did one study in Wisconsin. They followed 29 suspects, and they actually recorded their interrogations. And they were doing a study wanting to see how many people waived their Miranda rights in Wisconsin. So 93%, or 27 out of 29 suspects, waived their Miranda rights in that study. And that was due to the suspects not understanding their rights. They couldn't comprehend it because the law requires the 10th grade reading level to comprehend 75% of the rights.
Not to mention, they said during the time that they were read their rights, they were speaking 270% faster.
Yes. Yes, and they also minimize those rights. They say something like, "Oh, this is just a formality. I gotta read this, but you do understand that, so we can proceed. Understanding these rights, do you wish to continue talking to us?" But to Brendan, what they did, they totally tricked him. They said, "You have the right to talk to an attorney." So, you know what I mean? That you have the right to talk, pause, to an attorney, but we cannot give you one. So it's like, okay, so which way do I go? I would like to talk to an attorney, but you can't give it to me. What are my options? Do they
Yeah.
really
Exactly.
go over the
See,
whole 5 steps of it?
that gets altered from you have the right to remain silent, and that's a big difference.
Yes,
You have the
yes.
right to just shut your mouth and not talk.
But they told him
Well,
you have the right to talk with
and
an
just by
attorney.
them speeding up their language, as we all know from listening to Steve's jailhouse cost, you could set it at 1.5 and the Averys sound perfectly normal at that level when it's speeded up because they talk slow.
Yeah,
So just the fact that everybody in his family that he talks to all the time talks at a slower pace, and then when they do the Miranda, they talk way faster than normal. So that's way faster than he's used to taking information at.
yeah. And I didn't know that once you're Mirandized, and once you, let's say, waive your rights, that you still have the right, it's the law, to stop talking in the middle of the interrogation after you waived your rights and demand a lawyer. I didn't know that, so that's something that I
Well,
learned in this.
Earl, when they interviewed Earl, he kept telling them, okay, that's enough, I'm done, right? But then he'd keep talking afterwards.
Yeah, because they
Yeah.
lead you on. Yeah,
Yeah, that's exactly what they done to Brendan. They put him in a position with saying, "Oh, we're your pal. I've got a son your age," things like that, to make the man feel comfortable to that he's not going to be under arrest or anything like that, and that's the way they perceived that. So that Wayne didn't even think that he was in trouble, and then after he
yes,
said everything that he said, they're like, right, well, you know that we can't let you go now. And the look on that Wayne's face was unbelievable. It's like to say, but wait a minute, you said that if I said this and I said that, then I could go, which is
yeah.
completely wrong. It's completely wrong in my opinion. And why the en banc judges and that didn't see that, especially that Hamilton, I do not understand. It just completely baffles me.
I think he understood, but that's my opinion, and I don't want to go there now. And how they told Brandon, just tell the truth, and we're going to tell everybody that you are an honest man and that you told the truth, not like
Right,
Stephen Avery, right? And that will help him
right.
out.
But
So
stop,
that his statements are going to be used for him, not against him, which is actually the truth.
stop right
Yeah.
there, everybody. Just for a second, stop right there. Take a step back and count to 5 with a deep breath. What you all need to understand is there's a question that you should ask yourselves first. Did Brendan have any concept whatsoever that he was himself personally in any danger before any of this questioning started? Because if he didn't, and all their kind of mollycoddling, oh, Brendan, we're your pal bullshit and all the rest of it, that's just going to blow Brendan so far sideways, he isn't even going to be able to recognise a threat if he saw it 6 inches in
That's right.
front of his face. So when police caution somebody, usually they give you the explanation as to why they're cautioning you. Well, we would like to talk to you in connection with an incident. It has been alleged that you may be involved in blah, blah, blah. Did they warn Brendan of any of that? I don't think they did. All they did was they came in and they gave him the Miranda warning. He had no explanation of why he was being Mirandized. He didn't understand the Miranda. Brendan was a fish out of water the minute he walked into that school that day. And he had no idea what he was walking into.
And I dare to say for them to be doing an interrogation in the school facilitating it, Brendan was probably none the wiser about what was coming his way for the simple fact that he is in school.
I believe they ambushed Brendan in school because they knew it was the kind of move they wouldn't have been able to pull at any police station.
And they have no recording of what went on at the school.
Precisely.
Well, going deeper into a little bit, stepping back a little bit, these alleged statements that Kayla made, that's another problem there, big problem. Anyone that's listened to the calls understands what I'm talking about because they altered what she said.
Yeah.
Well, I want to know if they interviewed her, was that recorded?
I believe it was. It should have been.
And did she have an adult or a lawyer present as well?
But where was she? Hang on a second. School. Where was she interviewed? Was she interviewed at her home in the company of her mum? Or was she also?
School.
Well, I'm sorry, but anywhere outside of a formal police station, anywhere outside of a police station, a cop is going to tell almost everybody that they speak to. Outside of a police station, this is just an informal chat. We just want to ask you one or two things. You're not in any trouble. Do you know what I mean? And that is there. Why don't you just sit down for a second, relax? We're not here to do you any harm. We just want to make a couple of routine inquiries. Nothing. You're not in any trouble. Nothing for you to worry about. Well, then why the fuck are you here?
Isn't that yeah? If I'm remembering correctly, she told some counselors about some dreams she had had or something of that nature, and about
that what happened at the party or something.
Yeah.
About him crying. She told the counselor, and then the counselor's a mandatory reporter, and I think she told the police.
Yeah. I think Kayla made up a story to her counsellor at school because she wanted just to kind of maybe she wanted to get in a little infection in her head or something.
I'm more devious than that, Sean. I apologize for.
Well, no, not at all, fella. I'm trying to think of the best case scenario from Kayla's point of view.
Well,
do you know what I mean?
I think for Kayla, I'm sorry. I think it all came from Candy because she didn't give a damn. She didn't give a damn how she got Stephen. She didn't care. That's what she was after.
This is true.
I agree with you.
Any dead body, she left in her way.
I wonder what it is. What was it about Stephen? Was it just Marie? Is that the cause of all of Candy's problems?
It was certainly part of it, but he had already, Stephen, he was in the process of getting these millions of dollars, and he had already, whatever disagreements that he and Candy and whoever else in the family had.
Jealousy.
Well, yeah, that. I'm sure it was because he talked about that money a lot. So, there's going to be, in any kind of situation like that where you got a lot of your family around, there's going to be jealousy. Somebody's going to get mad as hell because they're not getting it. They're going to mouth off whatever. But Stephen had already told, whoever in the family, you're not getting shit from me. I'm going to give you a damn red nickel or red penny. You're not getting anything. So here we go.
They're all up in arms about it. Yeah,
exactly.
They haven't done fuck all for him for the 18 years that he's been in prison. But now that he's coming out and he's got all the money, they're going to want some of it. And because he doesn't want to pay it over, they're upset. Well, tough titty, man.
Well, and he says at one point in time when he's talking to his mother on one of the calls, she never did like me from the beginning.
No, she didn't.
Yeah.
And then, I'm sure part of it was driven from this his interaction with Marie. right, wrong, or
Right.
indifferent. I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to justify that. That was really stupid on his part for sure, or her part too. You know,
Look,
I've
it's
been in.
just one of those things. They happen all over the world, Jack. You know, I don't think it's any big deal in the bigger scheme of things, because, you know, it happens all the time, Jack.
I know it does. I know it does, and you know, I take into consideration that there's no blood relation of any kind, but you know, still, I'm sure that it was an
She is a
upsetting
bit
thing.
young.
She was
Yeah.
too young. Understanding though, you know, from his standpoint, you know, he's been locked up for almost 2 decades.
I think ultimately
He's
here,
a horn dog.
I
Because
think
who else?
ultimately here, we see that law enforcement basically does what they want when they want, irregardless of the laws.
That's right.
Absolutely.
I have a question regarding pulling a kid out of the school just
Yeah.
for casual questioning. Okay, so kids in school are generally speaking minors, right?
Yeah.
Maybe like in the senior year, some turn 18, some don't. So let's say they're all minors at this point. And police comes to ask him casual questions. If they do not automatically notify the parent, like they don't, you know why? Because if the kid says, sure, I'll do it, that's volunteering information. I have a personal experience with that with my son, so that's how I know. But wouldn't there be a student advocate, which somebody in school, whether it's a principal, you
You
know,
would
they have
think
all
so.
these functions, so that you would think so, who's going to
Absolutely.
sit there with them
There's
and
no
stand
law
up for the
here to
kid?
provide
They
I
that.
don't
would
think.
not be allowed.
Jay has a law like that, but we do not.
Yeah, I'm just thinking
We should
logically
have.
because, yes, as a nurse, I'm a patient advocate. No matter what happens there, who's in question,
Yeah.
what's going on, I'm there to protect the patient, right?
Right.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. As a teacher or a principal, assistant principal, psychologist, I would be there to protect the kid,
In
the kid's rights.
2005 in Wisconsin, the law made the law made allowances for children to be questioned without an appropriate adult. They
There
said
still is no law. There
is
still is.
so they can still do it. However, within an education system, there are certainly in the European Union and the UK, there are safeguarding not policies, law. These are written into British and European statute. It's law. A child cannot be accosted whilst they're at school. What can happen is that police can apply for a court order for a child to be questioned. When they go to the school, they must have appropriate adults. They must be a social worker, and there must be a nurse on station present at all times. They are not allowed to be alone. The police are not allowed to be alone with the child at any time.
I consider
It does not happen here in the UK.
I consider what they did to Brendan to be child abuse from law enforcement.
It's a
And
form
the school condoned it. And what are the
And the
legal
school condoned
implications?
it.
school
Yes.
facility. The school facilitated it.
That's
They allowed
right.
it to happen.
That's right.
And it was, look, the minute the kid leaves the house to go to school in the morning, it doesn't matter he's not on the school property. He is the responsibility of the school authority. In the UK, certainly, that is law. The child only has to leave the home on his way to school, and from that point on, they are the responsibility of the school. If anything happens to that child, if
That's
he's
the
arrested,
same way here.
anything like that,
My
the
point
school are
exactly.
responsible. There are safeguarding rules in force,
If-
and police cannot just walk into a school and demand, I want to talk to him or her or that student. It cannot happen.
I think we must be talking about in loco parentis.
Exactly.
That would be English common law, and it would be relevant in America.
Absolutely, you've got it there. Spot on, mate.
If your kid's on the way home from school, off school grounds, but on his way home from school, and they get in a fight, it's still considered on school property until
Yep.
they have reached their home.
That's
Yes.
exactly right, B. Yes, spot on. Yes, and you're right,
So
Hugh.
that part is law here.
That's and you're spot on. It's in loco parentis. That's
Then I would say that.
Yeah, which
exactly
means the
correct.
school is in the role of the parent.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
And that's shameful because
They allowed it to happen.
Took no part in looking after
I mean,
Brendan at all.
it's not like Wiegert and Fassbender walked into the school, knew exactly what rooms to approach without approaching any of the members of staff. Walked into the room, Brendan, we want a word with you. They had to go somewhere and ask where Brendan was, and then ask if it was okay, okay to speak with Brendan. And the school were at fault for allowing it.
Yep.
The
Yeah,
school
I'm
should-
sure.
the school
I'm sure Fleur talked to them about
Absolutely,
his IP before
yep.
they talked to him.
Yep.
Yes.
And I think that really and truly, the school should have turned around and said, well, okay, if you insist on talking to him, we're going to have our school counsellor present. And I can see Wiegert and Fassbender saying, well, actually, no, we can't do that because this is a rather delicate investigation. There is a lot of sensitive questioning that we need to ask the boy. We need to speak to him alone. Who's going to argue with that? Who in Wisconsin?
Because there's no law
Who
for
in
it.
Wisconsin's going to argue with that? Oh, no, right. The law might exist for them to speak to him, but the school have got a responsibility to make sure
Yes.
that the boy
Who is
is
protecting those
accompanied
children?
by an appropriate adult at all times. So the school have
Most of-
failed by allowing him to be questioned alone.
Most of our schools have a police officer built right in that's there from, whatever, 9 to 5 or whatever when the school's
Yeah.
open all the time on a regular
Yeah,
basis.
they do.
Yes.
They do.
It's a multiple failing. It's a failing on the part of the school. I mean, don't get me wrong, the people at Fox Hills, if I was the manager at Fox Hills, I would have been asking some serious fucking questions.
Yeah. But also how they word the whole thing. Oh, we just want to ask him a couple of questions. No big deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it takes your guard.
It's not in any trouble.
no.
We
We
just
just wanna, ask a couple
hope he might be able to
questions.
help
That's
us with
it.
a couple of things. Yeah.
And I think
He had
that's
no
exactly
idea.
what they told Barbara,
He
his
had
mother.
no
Oh, we're
idea.
just gonna ask him. So Barbara
They-
thinks Brendan knows nothing. He wasn't even there, or you know what I
Right.
mean. What is
So-
You're like, okay, sure,
So
ask.
in all of their statements, they're saying, "Oh, well, at this point, Brendan was a witness." Did they tell Brendan that they were treating him as a witness? Because it sounds to me that from the very off, they were treating it. Brendan was always a suspect. I
Well,
don't care what they say in their report. We were just talking. We just wanted to talk to him as though he was a witness at this point. Bullshit.
Well-
They treated him like a suspect from the very off
As we-
because of the conversation that he'd had with O'Neill and Baldwin in the back of that patrol car.
as
I
we have
honestly-
learned throughout this trial, there is a humongous, like Grand Canyon discrepancy between what they say and what they do.
Yep.
I just have a point to make here that bothers me about this whole business with the school, with them getting him at school. Whoever is in charge of that school that day, if this did not pertain to school matters, why was it allowed, period? My first thing would be, I would have to use discretion. I would have to say to them, if this is not pertaining to a school matter, this has to happen at another time or elsewhere, or at least call the parent or counselor. And none of this was done. None of this is brought up as
It's not going to happen in school time. It's not going to happen
Yeah.
in school property.
right.
Yep. Not on my watch and not on my premises. If you want Brendan, you wait till he goes home. You can go
Right.
and arrest him at home and do whatever you like. But this is my school. I'm the boss. I want you off of my premises, and Brendan is staying here. That should have been the way the law was laid down to them to.
But instead, they
Right.
were allowed to go in there. They were
Yep.
allowed to have someone to identify the child and bring the child to them because they very well could not have gone and retrieved him themselves. They took full advantage of this. in every way.
Well,
In fact,
and
I
like I
would
said,
say
they have cops built. They have cops built into the high schools anyway. They're like truant officers, but they stay all day. And if any other laws or infractions get broken during the day, they also take care of them, which I'm sure that the detectives would have talked to that officer too. I'm not sure if Manitowoc School or Two Rivers,
I mean, it
whatever school
wasn't.
it is that they go to,
It
has that. But any sizable high school has a truant
yeah,
officer that's there full time every
yeah.
day.
Before watching Making a Murderer and poor Brendan and what happened, not even going into Steve, let's concentrate on Brendan. I was really naive. Now I see, even dumb, if I can say that for myself, when it comes to the laws, when it comes to the belief in the system, and where the presumption of innocence. Based on what I saw during Making a Murderer and what happened to poor Brendan, my eyes have opened. And wouldn't you know it, my son got into an iffy situation at school at age 14. And I can relate to Brendan's story very much. Luckily for us, nothing happened. God, what happened to Brendan. But it was really what I felt. I almost vomited when I heard what happened to my son, which shortly I can tell you that my son was in a fight. He was suspended for 3 days. He was defending somebody's honor. It doesn't matter. At 14, you want to
Yes.
do, you want to be stoic and, all of that and brave. And he got into a fight, suspended for 3 days. And he asked me, can I go and hang out outside the premises of the school at a bagel shop with my friends? Because he was at home and bored to death. And I'm like, sure, just be home at 3:30. Text me when you come home. So he went, and at 3:30 came and went, and he never texted me. So at 3:31, I texted him, and he never replied. I kept texting him, calling him, texting him till 4 o'clock. And finally he answered the call and he said, I'm at school. And I'm like, what are you doing at school? You're not supposed to be at school, right? And he goes, I'm in the principal's office. So all of a sudden, things have changed drastically. And I'm like, why are you there? You're not supposed to be at school. Now you're at the principal's office. What did you do? Right? So he said nothing. And I said, okay. I'm like, I'll be right there. So I just flew from work to over there and I walked into the principal's office where the following people were present: principal, assistant principal, sheriff, on campus police guy, undercover police for drugs, I think,
Jeez.
and my son. No parent was even called. So I
Wow.
said, what's going on over here? So the sheriff told me, well, we had some questions. There was a rumor starting at school about your son, and we just wanted to clarify something. We didn't believe the rumors. We just wanted to hear that from your son's mouth. So they told me about the rumor, which was like horrible. So I looked at my son and I whispered into his ear. I'm like, did you have anything to do with this? And he whispered back, and I looked him in the eye afterwards when he said, no, Mom, I had nothing to do with this. So I said, how did he end up in the principal's office from the bagel shop? So the on-campus policeman said, he goes, well, we know that kids hang out there. We had a feeling that, he's home alone, bored and whatnot, that he might be at the bagel shop. So we just wanted to ask him a few questions. And we said, hey, do you want to walk to the to the principal's office, or do you want us to drive you
What?
in the police car? Yes. And my 14-year-old said, he goes, well, he was thinking, I have nothing to hide. Sure, you can drive me. So they put him in the car. He volunteered. They asked him, do you want to do this? And he said yes. And they drove him to the principal's office, and they never called him, to which I pitched a fit. I was a screaming, livid mother. I'm like, how dare you?
What
And how
gave
could you?
them
Don't
the
you have
right to go
children?
round to the bagel shop and arrest him in the first place?
They didn't arrest him. That's the thing.
Ah,
They
well,
said, we asked him and he voluntarily got into the
yeah.
car. And I'm like, so you misuse his trust.
Or
And what does he know about his rights and about, potential danger and how this could be, spun into like his disfavor, grave disfavor?
they've got an experienced law enforcement officer to tell him that he must accompany them because they've got some
Yes.
questions that they need to ask, and we need to get this cleared
Yes.
up. Well, making a demand for him to go with them isn't quite the same as being invited to accompany them, is it? Do you know what I mean? And they will
Exactly.
always spin it in their own favour. But this is a 14-year-old kid we're talking about,
Yeah.
and there are safeguarding rules that even they are obliged by law to comply with in the case of a 14-year-old kid. Why are they all standing around in the principal's office with a 14-year-old kid and that boy's on his own? What
I
is
asked
going
that.
on?
Why didn't you call me? He's a minor. He's 14. You know that.
Because
They said because he voluntarily got into the car. And I'm like, what if he didn't?
bullshit.
They
Bullshit.
said
He was,
we would have needed to get a warrant for that.
Yeah.
And I was done. And I'm like, we're leaving.
Come on, we're going home.
So there you go. Kind of same situation. They could have made
Sorry.
him look
Not
guilty.
look guilty.
You know what I mean?
All they had
And
to
we
do was
would have
make him feel guilty.
feel
for him
guilty.
To,
Yeah.
for him to feel that he needed to do what they were
Mhm.
telling him because he was complying with the order of the law. But
Yeah.
were they obviously were not acting within the law.
They were setting him up, and that's exactly
It's-
what I told them. You set him up.
It's called playing the game, and it is
Yeah.
a game, and it's how they can bend the rules to get what they want
Yeah.
without breaking the rules in a way that later on they can explain it. They will always be believed because they are the law enforcement and the criminals are the habitual liars. And so it's a win-win game as far as the law are concerned. They will always come out on top.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
Everything they do screams that their character is just rotten. I think it's Fassbender who says that how can he be expected to know
it's
what
not my
Brendan's
job.
limitations
It's
are?
not my job to
Yeah, I'm
assess
not an
IQ.
expert.
And yet,
Yeah.
yes, that
Would
should
you
be
very-
a part of their
well,
training. If you're
in
trained to know
Fassbender-
who's telling the truth or not, then you have to also know their psychological level
Yeah, and it's
and profiling
it's
and everything
obvious.
else. Yeah.
And they go into this situation having researched thoroughly, and I'm sure this is the case. They know how Brendan works. They have actually broken down what they have to do. They know he's not a 16-year-old or whatever. He's more like an 8 or a 10-year-old, and they go in totally insincere in every area. The presumption of innocence, the due process, the Miranda rights, silence, and you can leave, and you can call a lawyer, and you can terminate it. None of that is given with any sincerity. They lie, they mislead him, they use the father figure thing, the truth will set you free, you can go back to class. It's just disgusting.
It is disgusting.
It's disgusting, and I was saying earlier today that, they go into it and they just grab this kid and destroy his life in absolute cold blood.
Yep.
It is revolting.
It is.
Just to get back to the purpose of why we're all here, I would like to say I think that this chap, Michael Cicchini, is a very fantastic author. He's laid everything out in a very methodical, even a clinical way. We can all understand kind of what he's saying. He's being very sympathetic towards Brendan. That comes across. You can't exactly miss that. As far as the book goes, what does everybody think about it?
I love
loving it. Yeah.
I like that he lays everything out in layman's terms.
It's
Absolutely, yeah.
educational.
Legal terms that you could barely grasp what he's saying.
I think he's written
breaks it down really well.
Yes.
I think he's produced a piece of work there that even guilters can't fail to understand.
Right. Exactly.
He does that in his other book too. It's
Yeah,
the
part one,
the legalities are really explained where the normal person can understand him. I really like him as an author.
I mean, it takes someone with a legal mind, and he's obviously a very, very, very good lawyer. To put it on the table the way he has, it's all laid out. It's easy to follow. You can see what they've done. He's given reason and explanation to all of the methods and the practices and everything else that Uyghur and Fassbender and all the rest of it have been up to, and it makes perfect sense from where I'm sitting exactly what they did to Brendan. And yeah, I think it's a brilliant book, and I think it should be.
I said the one on Steve Avery after reading that one. I said, "Oh my God! If I ever get in trouble, I want this guy for my lawyer." Yeah.
I wish the jury read this book actually, because it talks about Miranda rights and what they heard, how Brendan was Mirandized. They're two different stories, right? Because there's a actual logical sequence that you have to kind of follow for Miranda warnings, and that was obviously disconcerted and confused, and they did it in a malicious way to Brendan, so they could confuse him, so he doesn't understand. And when you ask a 16-year-old, where do you live, which city do you live, and he says Wisconsin, that should be kind of a red flag right there, that Wisconsin is a state, that it's not a city. You know what I mean? That we have an issue just going by that. And then his demeanor, his answers, his comprehension or lack of throughout the questioning or interrogation. You know what I mean? And for Fassbender to say, I'm not there to assess his developmental level, man, if that's not illegal and if that's not wrong, then I don't know what it is.
We have to think about on the terms of how police have treated people, suspects, defendants, whatever. Somebody's even going to question that they may have to Mirandize. Miranda, when it was passed in the late 60s by the Supreme Court, this was a really landmark thing. And I don't know how much, and I haven't done a lot of research on it, I've done some. You have to look at what happened when the Supreme Court did that. The backroom bright light and rubber gloves and the rubber hose treatment had to stop. They couldn't beat a confession into people and get them to admit to stuff. So they changed tactics. Of course, the Reed technique really came into play, and this was to me, people have different opinion, but to me, the Reed technique is a direct assault on many of our civil rights, but Miranda is one of them. It's a way to break it down and get around it.
Yes.
Legally.
Well, and also it's
all how it's delivered.
It's the mental assault. Instead of beating us with the rubber hose or whatever.
That's right.
They're now hammering away at our brain.
Psychological effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And remember how they said, yes, remember how they said, well, no, Brendan was treated better than other suspects because he was sitting on a cushy couch and he was offered water and soda and lunch and whatnot.
Yeah, that was Judge Hamilton.
Yes.
Bloody.
So why did you put a cushy couch? Then you can say that everybody's treated that way if the only place to sit is a cushy couch. You know what I mean? So it's totally taken out of the context. So who cares where do you sit if your rights have been violated? I'd rather sit on a, iron bench, and if I'm treated with respect and within my rights, that would be fine.
Well, yeah.
I won't sue them for sitting on a iron bench versus a cushy couch.
Yeah, sitting some kid on a nice couch in an air-conditioned room, cramming full of sandwiches and pop, big deal.
Nice is debatable. It was just kind of an average little love seat.
Exactly.
But Steve just got hard plastic chairs or whatever,
But that does not mean that his rights were not violated. And if you offer him water after 8 hours being in there and knowing that you're going to keep him even more, that's kind of also humane, because if you didn't, you could have put him in a health jeopardy, because you don't know if he's diabetic, you don't know his condition, you don't know anything about it. And dehydration is a serious problem.
Yeah, what gets me as well is the fact that Fassbender says that it's no up to him to decide what Brendan's IQ is, but it's up to them to say that they're a human lie
Yeah.
detector.
Exactly, because they were trained in all of that. He was just lying, just like Fallon was lying when he said innocent men don't confess. And we
Aye.
know that people confess wrongly all the time.
How can police expect to hold people to a higher standard when they are themselves being given the backing of the law to go into an interview room and lie to a suspect? If they are being given permission to go and lie during an interview in an attempt to gain information,
They already knew Brendan's IQ. They got his reports from the principal before they ever interrogated him.
Of
They already
course,
knew.
they knew. But then don't get me wrong, Carla, you can look at that on the other hand. From the time Brendan was spoken to by O'Neill and Baldwin in the back of that police car, they had the measure of Brendan. They knew where Brendan was coming from. They knew the kind of intellectual capability of the lad. So, I think personally, I think they always knew that Brendan would be a last resort.
Yeah, I
Yes.
wouldn't be surprised if the first two officers were just sent out in a sense
To measure him up,
and then
and
sent back and said to we get Fassbender, or here, pal, you're all right. You'll be able to mold
yeah,
them to what you want and
yeah.
put stuff in. Do you know what I mean? Manipulate them just that wee bit. But I think you'll be able to get them. And then for there, they've went in and they've just stormed right in and they've done what they've done, and it is disgusting. And I don't know how the hell they've got away with it.
The biggest obstacle that they faced with Brendan was Barb.
Yeah.
Haven't
Barbara
talked
was
about
the biggest.
the engineering there.
Well, that's why. Like, oh no, Barb, you don't want to go in there. There's some grisly details being discussed in there. You don't want to. You don't want to be party to all of that. You know, I'm sure you don't want to hear that. Oh, well, and then like they say, well, we invited her in, but she said that she didn't want to be in there. Bullshit. No mother
Well, I think
is
she
going
had
to
to.
Saying
She had
the
want you to be in
discrepancy
there.
because of what they say and how they spin it and what they did is humongous. Humongous.
Well,
In
that's
the
when
UK,
my opinion changed to Barb. Because at the beginning I was like, how could she do that? How could she let him go through all this on her own and everything like that? But when was on the stand and it came to that bit about saying, oh well, we did offer her if she
Yeah.
wanted to come in, but she says that she didn't, and the camera was on Barb at the time, and her face, and she
was
basically,
fury.
I could lip read because of my dad, and she basically says, you fucking
In
liar.
liars.
Yep.
Yeah.
Here in the UK, if if a parent is called to a police station to accompany their child, they can refuse to attend, in which case the police need to approach the local authority for the area in which the child has been arrested. They send a social worker. The social worker then becomes the appointed appropriate adult as to act as a representative.
Yeah, they have an advocate in their
What is
corner.
They have to
or
have
what
an advocate,
or
exactly.
what is known in the UK as
There you
a
go.
Mackenzie man. I don't know where, I can't remember where that term comes from. Anyway, if
Probably by a law.
if a parent attends a police station and then declines to be included in a interview with their child, they are required to sign paperwork to that effect. That's a legal requirement. Obviously, that isn't the case in America.
No.
And in that case, again, the police have to rely on the local authority to provide an appropriate adult. But either way, that child must never, ever be spoken to or questioned. in regards to any investigation or inquiry without that adult.
Well,
They must be.
that goes back into this psychological game. Even part of what you were talking about a minute ago about this deception that police are armed with going into an interview. Okay, I get that. With hardened criminals, I get that. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think it should be a truth-driven thing from beginning to end. Because if you begin your investigation armed with a lie,
that's right. Then what does everything that you've done? What does it stand on?
Well,
it stands on a foundation of untruths.
Well, and not only that, because it created a culture, and it's, in my opinion, it's alive and well in many areas of the U.S. This culture of just being able to lie whenever it blew up well beyond the interrogation room, which we're supposed to be limited. So,
I'm a cop. Of course, I can lie. I can lie anywhere to anybody, and that's what I do. I'm a policeman. That's my job.
That's right. And then the Supreme Court steps in and grants this qualified immunity to officers. It's not a law. It's not a law. It's something that happened in a case, whatever case it was, and they granted these officers immunity from being charged or whatever they had done.
Right.
So. And I agree with you, Jack. And my question is also, if you have a minor, and let's say able-minded minor, not like Brendan, right? Like an average kid. Who is a minor, right? He or she cannot sign any legal paperwork. Nothing that pertains to law. They cannot buy a house. Absolutely. They cannot get a driver's license. They
cannot be legally responsible for the signing of a legal document.
Exactly. Then how can they be legally able to waive their Miranda rights?
That's a very good question.
Because children here are miraculously treated as adults depending on their crime, or how much they want them, or the brutality of their crime, or
BB just nailed it.
Yep.
Or if they want them, or if they want them, or
they absolutely have to have them to sink Steve. Then all that factors in some weird math that they have.
If Steven didn't have a target on his forehead, Brendan would have been dismissed within 5 minutes.
Oh, it's the draft. We're at war. Let's start just taking 16-year-olds right out of high school off the street and putting them in.
If there was anything honest about that investigation, Brendan would have been thrown out the front door within an hour. They would have, it would like, what is he doing here? Kind of, why have you brought me down to speak to this kid? You stupid. So put him in a car and take him home. And there would have been screaming in the police station.
In fact, take him by the hamburger shop and get him
and get
everything he wants to eat in a big ice cream.
Take him via JD, buy him a pair of trainers. You spend your next week's wages on that boy, and I want to see the receipts. Do you know what I mean? They would have gone mental. Mental.
Just one last thing from me, please.
Sure. Sorry.
It's well after 2:30 a.m. in Sydney, so this will be the last thing I say. But didn't Barb have a commitment at a divorce court that stopped her from being at the critical interview? So that was an engineered situation.
That would have been well timed.
Convenient, right, baby?
I don't believe in coincidence.
Yeah.
Sorry, but
everything always so convenient.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
See you
Have
later.
a good evening.
What I wanted to say is that, like in this book, Jean Bonnet case was brought up, and Cicchini said, which is true, that this guy, an adult, confessed to the murder of Jean Bonnet, and they dismissed him.
Oh, Carl.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Straight.
So you have adults confessed,
Yeah.
volunteering. And they're
And
like, no, never
almost-
mind, because they couldn't corroborate.
And
Well,
despite
we have
all of the emotion, despite all of the public opinion and the public outrage, they turned around really quick and they said to themselves, "This cannot be possible. Send him out." And it happened quick,
yeah.
despite all the anger, all the emotion.
And
All the
he's a
cops
pedophile
wanting to
anyway,
get
right?
somebody.
He's a offender. Yeah, yeah. So there you
It
go.
wouldn't be
But
the
when they
first
want you,
time.
they will get you.
It wouldn't be the
Yes,
first time a
it
crackpot
wouldn't
has
be.
walked into a police station and said, "I'm the guilty party." You know,
Right. There
in
are
New,
a certain percentage of people worldwide that just have this
in New York,
compulsion to do that.
it's a regular occurrence where you're getting all kinds of mentally disturbed people walking in police stations and putting their hands up to any Tom, Dick, and Harry's kind of multiple murders and serial killings. Oh, I'm the guy you're looking for, and they spend days and weeks on these people, and it's become a joke.
Yeah.
You know, they talk about, you got to expect a certain percentage of calls coming into a hotline as being crank calls and just lunatics looking to claim credit for something they haven't done.
But then there's Brandon, and they got him after they fed all that information to him. Who shot her in the head? What was he doing under the hood? If that's what he was doing.
Yeah, and how they judges didn't think that was leading Brendan. I will never, never, never understand or comprehend, because everything in that interview was led or fed by Fassbender and Rieger. And that's just my opinion, but
Yeah, I believe.
yeah. And the fact that as Rhonda was saying, that Wayne, even if he had the right to turn around and say no, that's enough. That Wayne has probably been brought up to be told, respect your elders, don't answer back, don't
Do
be
as you're
cheeky,
told.
do what you're told.
No,
And with him and saying, no, that's it, I'm not want to answer any more questions, that's going to be considered as him cheeky or out of order or anything like that, and he didn't want to make any more trouble, and he just went on to answer the questions.
Throughout Brendan's life, no had never been an option that he had ever been given by anybody.
Well,
when he was told to do something, he was demanded. If he turned around and said no, what do you think that boy came in for?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He was bullied by his brothers. He was neglected by his mum. The only people there that showed him any love was Alan, Dolores, and Stephen.
Guys, I hate to interrupt, but we're heading into 3.5 hours now.
Wow.
Yeah, Silkman did a demonstration, and where his statement changed at, and where his statement significantly changed at is when they bring a bus driver into it. When they say, well, so what then? Your bus driver's lying because she says she's seen Teresa there taking pictures, which she's obviously got the wrong day because it wasn't down by the mailbox. But that is where he suddenly then said, oh no, she must be right. So I must have seen her.
And are you saying that all the other kids on the bus are lying and you're the only one?
Yeah.
No pressure. Yeah.
Right. And that's where they caved him in at. That's where they seen how malleable he was and how they can mold him like clay.
Can I chime in?
Yes.
Absolutely.
By all means, Dr. Silkman. I've been quoting you today.
I know. I've been listening.
I quote you frequently.
Yes, it's like 2:20 in the morning, so it's my dog is still keeping me up. But no, I listen to all the conversations. I just want to say that, wow, Wizard, what a fantastic read. That was awesome.
Thank you. Thanks, Doc.
Really,
I really appreciate that. That means a
really
lot.
enjoyed it.
That means a lot coming from you. I really appreciate that, man.
That was awesome.
Cheers.
I actually bought Cicchini's other book that
Right.
goes through the history of Stephen Avery. I'm just reading that at the moment, but I just want to say that, yeah, look, things went really downhill for Brendan, as we know, right from that very first interview at Crivets by O'Neill. And O'Neill said it in court that he felt that Brendan was hiding something. Right? So, and you're right, no matter what Brendan said, they wouldn't accept his answers at all. And it's very disingenuous because he actually did tell the truth initially. The very first thing that he said was the truth. You know, it was a plain, boring story. But now you got to remember, right? Both him and his brother were on the bus, right? So his perfect alibi was his brother Blaine. And you see what they wanted to do, and even in court, they didn't ask Blaine any questions to corroborate Brendan, and it was done deliberately. So remember, Blaine was also questioned at, I think it was some type of restaurant, one day before Brendan got questioned by O'Neill. And basically, Blaine said, nope, I didn't see Teresa Horbuck. I didn't see her vehicle. Right? This was one day before. So, you know, both boys, they got off the bus and they went home. Now, Brendan, unfortunately, because of his disabilities, he actually changed the story 3 times. The moment he did that, he was doomed, because it meant that the kid was malleable, impressionable, and willing to change his stories and accounts. And then, of course, you've got his cousin Kayla, who started mentioning all sorts of bits and pieces. So, in effect, Fassbender and Wiegert targeted Brendan. He was the most vulnerable one. And, you know, we know what happened. It's shocking, absolutely shocking.
And they couldn't break anybody else. So
they tried it with Jody. She basically told them to bugger off. She wasn't interested. So they just went down the chain, and poor Brendan was extremely susceptible. And the only thing I could say is that both Fassbender and Wiegert should be completely ashamed of what they did. It really is a low point. It's a shocker.
I couldn't agree with you more, Dr. Silkman, but instead we know what happened with Wiegert and Fassbender. They got promoted,
correct, but
and they got accolades.
Understand the fundamental roots of all this, and it all comes down, and Wizard mentioned it, it all comes down to one thing, and that is the read technique, right? So everything that Fassbender and Wiegert said, according to the read technique, was permissible. So with Brendan, he had no idea what was fact, fantasy, lies, or misconception. He had no idea, right? So during the courses of his interrogations, in his mind, he actually became convinced that his uncle killed Teresa Orbach, right? He doesn't know how, because he wasn't there, he didn't see anything, but they convinced him that his uncle had actually committed this murder, and that his uncle was going to blame Brendan, right? Remember what they said to him? Oh, you better speak up, Brendan.
It's either him or you,
Your uncle's going to blame you for this and blame you for that. What was the first thing that Brendan said to O'Neill? My family don't trust cops, right? And in actual fact, Brendan even said to O'Neill regarding the RAV4, I got planted there by the police. So you can imagine these guys, their minds are whirring, thinking, "Uh-oh, what the hell's going on here?" Because Stephen said the same thing to Fassbender and Uyghur, that he had information that the RAV4, the blood, etc., got planted. So these guys got on the front foot and said, "No, we're going to stamp all this out," right? So they isolated Brendan, right? And they targeted him, and they put him against his own uncle. Now, if you look at the Reed technique, everything that they said to him was legal, right? And if you look at the en banc judges, what did they say? Judge Hamilton said, "Oh, what now? We're going to change the law because of some 16-year-old kid?" So what they were doing, in essence, they were terrified that if they let Brendan go, it meant that the Reed technique was garbage, and it is, right? So therefore, Judge Hamilton had to dissent because he was protecting the technique that's used predominantly in America to question potential suspects. And so unfortunately, Brendan, he fell through the cracks. He was the victim of the Reed technique.
Here in Europe, we have very, very stringent legal protections for all defendants.
Yes.
Subject to interview under caution in a police station. They must be videotaped, they must be recorded, there are procedures that must be gone through. The paperwork that must be signed it's a mountain. It is an absolute mountain of bureaucracy. They must tick all sorts of boxes to ensure that a defendant or a suspect has been warned as to his rights, as to what's going on, you know, the phone calls, the lawyers, what they're entitled to, and the rest of it.
Yes.
The Reed technique,
Yes.
it could not exist in this country, because any decent barrister would take it into court and they would absolutely rip it to pieces for breakfast. And what's more, the judge would praise them for it. Now, this is how British law evolves. We make bad mistakes. We take those mistakes into court. Those mistakes are torn to pieces and chewed apart by the judge. And that goes on to creating future laws by which the preservations of freedom and the protections of the subject are guaranteed. You know, in America, you are a century behind the times. You are still in the wild west.
We're supposed to be a land of the free.
Yet you lock more people up per capita than any other country on the planet, and you spend more money on perpetuating a wrongful conviction than you ever spend trying to apply scientific crime detection techniques. In Europe and in Britain, we are thorough in our studies, in our development of the rules and regulations and everything else. It's scientific. If it doesn't work and it's proven not to work, we don't use it. The Reed technique, the Reed wouldn't last 5 minutes in this country as a business. They might be okay in the corporate sector, but even in Britain, you know, we've got laws. The working man has got protections that will protect him from the Reed technique being used by any company against him. It would not be allowed to stand. It would be thrown out of court. No judge in Britain would allow it. It would just go, it's what you Americans call junk science. It's crap. isn't worth
Correct.
the paper it's written on. And yet your High Court judges and your Supreme Court judges think the sun shines out of Mr. Reed's backside. What a load of rubbish.
Well, if yeah, well, I mean, all the warning signs should have been there, right? And even Uyghur admitted that yes, they did lie, yes, they did stretch the truth, etc., etc. But it never crossed their mind that they did anything illegal, right? That's the major sticking point. They played by the rules. Brendan had no idea. Brendan couldn't differentiate between fact and fantasy. Brendan had no idea of the consequences of what he was telling the investigators. So, on the one hand, they lulled him into a false sense of security, right? Once they got their confession, they said, well, what do you think we're going to do to you now? With the police, of course we're going to arrest you. And Brendan must be thinking, what the, right?
Yeah.
So, look, if the read technique still persists, then a lot of people are going to be wrongfully convicted. But you know what the sting in the tail is? The lawsuits and the civil suits. One day someone's going to get a civil lawsuit that's in the hundreds of millions of
Millions.
dollars. And only then, like if Stephen gets exonerated and he sues for $250 million, you watch them ditch the read technique super quick.
Yeah.
Because if other states of America use the peace technique,
Yes.
other countries around the
Yes.
world use the peace, they've chucked out read, then it'll be so this is the greatest comeback for someone who's been incarcerated wrongfully. That is, they have the ability for a civil lawsuit. Surely it's got to get to the thick skulls of the states that use the read technique. Guys, this ain't working. We've got all these prisoners locked up who are innocent, and you got things like DNA that exonerates them 20, 30 years down the track. But there's one problem with Brenton. There's no forensic evidence against that kid, right? None. So they can't even do a DNA test to prove he's innocent because he was never there, right? So that poor kid, he's in prison because of, as I said, just words. That's the tragedy. It's just words.
And none of it's worth the paper it's written on.
No, but you see, the frustrating thing is that people like Fallon had to make up and also Kate Kratz had to make up a fanciful story, and then they had to stick to it. No matter how stupid it sounded, they had to stick and adhere to it. Otherwise, they would have got laughed at. The whole scenario is preposterous, right? Yet, I think Neville said it as well. How in the hell did a jury of 12 find that kid guilty?
Well, he keeps saying the recordings, the author keeps saying the recordings are a window into the black box, but it's
Yes.
a very frosted over window into it because they didn't fully, all the recordings aren't there. They didn't fully follow the law, which was to not use the read technique. So you're still, and in the end for trial, they also came up with that thing where he made one condensed CD just with the confession, like the written out confession, to simplify things for the jury at court. So the jury's still not seeing all
It's
the
not simplifying.
shenanigans.
It's not simplifying anything for anyone. It's misdirection of the
Yes.
jury. Never mind it's simplifying matters. What you're doing is you're hiding relevant information from a jury. It's like they needed to see the full video recordings of all of those interviews from start to finish. They can't chop it halfway and say, oh, well, that's all the evidentiary value you're going to get in that. So they didn't see Brendan saying, yeah, but the mum, they got into my head. I mean, I think that was relevant.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
Instead, he made this condensed CD that Kretz wanted to make it simpler for the jury so that they could just show this little short video where he confesses.
I'd like to
and
That's
not all
right.
the shenanigans.
That's
Yeah.
right.
I'd like to condense them into something.
Yes.
So that makes it a frosted over window.
Like a burn barrel.
You're still not really seeing into the black box, as he called it, you know.
No, of course you're
Yep.
not. No, it's a closed off room. But you know, over here that could never happen. There has to be transparency. There has to be accountability all the way across the board, from the lowest police constable to the highest chief inspector order.
Well, my God, we need it here. We so desperately need
chief
to
of
adapt some of
constabulary
these
is,
things.
all the way up to the Home Secretary, and he is the government minister responsible for the police. So there has to be accountability all the way up the line. And in this country, most of the time, there is accountability. If there's a really big problem, people at the top, they do resign. And that's the axe. All right, they're not going to see legal action, but the axe has fallen. They've lost their job. That's the price they pay for screwing up, and it happens. It does happen. Why not in America? You know, they take these oaths, and these oaths that they take to serve and protect aren't worth a rub. They really. It's a farce. America is a scam. And the people are the ones paying for it. They're the patsies. They're the ones who are always being shafted over a barrel.
I've read some of the newer writings on that, and technically, serve and protect isn't really in there anymore on these oaths.
I mean, in the British oath, actually, the police constable taking the oath does not promise or swear to serve the people.
Neither does it here
His
anymore.
oath is to the Crown, to Her Majesty, and that is where it goes. Their oath is to keep the Queen's peace, and that is the oath.
To like the laws, yes. Protected serve really isn't in there anymore.
No,
It was always
not
just an illusion. I don't know.
It is a concept. It is a concept formed in the minds of the American people in the wording of the very Constitution. That's the Constitution plants the idea in the heads of Americans that they are born free, that they are entitled to live their life to the best of their abilities, to exploit their own capabilities, and to make for themselves what they can, and that should be free from obstruction, from tyranny or government. And that's the idea. So, that's what Protect and Serve was all supposed to be about.
When I was a kid, it was all officer friendly. Now they're all militarized.
Yes. Yeah.
You talk to a police officer now, he's wearing a
black jacket, body armor.
He's got canisters all over the front of his jacket. He looks very militarized. Even his stance is very militarized.
He's ready for guerrilla warfare. He is ready for urban warfare
they're really
at the end of the day.
Now,
and they're not a public service. They are almost a paramilitary force.
Yeah. They've really become very militarized. They've been spending extra grant monies on buying up military surplus items for them to use. And they are very militarized now.
That's the first two sections of the book. 11 chapters passed. It's been a great discussion.
It's awesome.
Thank you, Doc, for joining us, and everybody else for taking part in the discussions and everything else. Thank you for listening.
This has been a Foul Play production.